I never thought a Sunday afternoon would change everything I believed about my family. My name is Eleanor, and I have spent 63 years trying to be the kind of woman who holds things together, who smooths over conflicts, who keeps the peace no matter what. That Sunday in late October, surrounded by fallen leaves and the smell of pumpkin pie cooling on the kitchen counter, I learned that sometimes keeping the peace means being complicit in something unforgivable. The morning started like any other family gathering. My son Marcus called me 3 days earlier to invite me to what he called a casual get-together at his house. Nothing fancy, he said, just family. I remember feeling pleased about it because these gatherings had become less frequent since he married Victoria 5 years ago. She was always so busy with her charity work, her yoga classes, her book club meetings. I told myself I understood. Young mothers need their space, their own lives. I raised 3 children myself, so I knew how consuming it could be. I arrived at their house around 1 in the afternoon. The colonial-style home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, with its perfectly manicured lawn and seasonal decorations that Victoria changed like clockwork. Halloween decorations adorned the porch, those expensive ones from the boutique stores downtown, not the plastic supermarket kind. I parked my sedan behind my daughter's SUV and noticed my other son's truck was already there too. The whole family, I thought. How lovely. My daughter Jennifer met me at the door. She hugged me quickly, but something felt off. Her embrace was stiff, mechanical. I pulled back to look at her face, and that is when I noticed the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile did not quite reach them. Jennifer spoke quietly. "Mom, I need to tell you something before you go in." "What is wrong, sweetheart? Is someone sick?" She glanced over her shoulder toward the living room, where I could hear the murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, someone laughing. "It is about Lily. My granddaughter." My heart constricted immediately. Lily was 6 years old, the light of my life, with her gap-toothed smile and wild imagination. She was the child who still believed in fairy gardens and thought clouds were made of cotton candy. She would spend hours at my house, and we would bake cookies together, make up stories, play dress-up in the old clothes I kept in a trunk in the spare bedroom. "What about Lily? Tell me right now, Jennifer." Before my daughter could answer, Victoria's voice rang out from inside the house. "Eleanor, you are here. Come in. Come in." Jennifer squeezed my hand. "Just please, try to stay calm. Promise me." I walked into the living room on shaking legs, not knowing what to expect. My son Marcus stood by the fireplace, his face carefully neutral. My younger son David sat on the couch next to his wife Amanda, both of them looking uncomfortable. Victoria stood in the center of the room like a hostess from a magazine spread, perfectly dressed in a cream cashmere sweater and dark jeans, her blonde hair swept up in an elegant bun. Then I saw her. Lily sat on the floor near the coffee table, playing with a set of blocks. But something was terribly, horrifically wrong. Her head was completely shaved, the pale skin of her scalp visible under the harsh overhead lights. Not just a short haircut, not a pixie cut or a bob. Completely bald. This beautiful child who had gorgeous dark curls, thick and shiny like her father's, now looked like a chemo patient. I felt my purse slip from my fingers and hit the hardwood floor with a thud. The sound made Lily look up, and when she saw me, her face lit up with that pure, uncomplicated joy that only children possess. "Grandma Eleanor." She started to get up, but Victoria put a hand on her shoulder, keeping her seated. The gesture looked casual, but I saw the firmness in it, the control. My voice came out as barely a whisper. "What happened to her hair?" Victoria laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, this?" She had it coming. The room went completely silent. Even the background music from the kitchen seemed to fade away. I stared at this woman, my son's wife, the mother of my granddaughter, trying to process what she had just said. "I do not understand. What do you mean she had it coming?" Victoria walked over to a chair and sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. She gestured for me to sit as well, but I could not move. I just stood there, rooted to the spot, staring at my granddaughter's bare scalp. Victoria continued, her voice light and conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "Lily has been having issues with her hair care routine. She fights me every single morning when I try to brush it. She screams, she cries, she makes a huge production out of something so simple. I have tried everything. Rewards, punishments, explaining nicely. Nothing worked. Marcus finally spoke up. Victoria, maybe we should not get into all this right now. His wife turned to him with a sharp look. Why not? Your mother should know what we have been dealing with. It is not like we made this decision lightly. My throat felt tight. You shaved her head? Completely bald? Because she did not like getting her hair brushed? Victoria's expression hardened. It was more than that, Eleanor. It was about teaching her responsibility and consequences. She is 6 years old enough to understand that when she refuses to take care of something, she loses the privilege of having it. I felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Privilege? Hair is not a privilege, Victoria. It is part of her body. Jennifer moved closer to me, putting a hand on my elbow to steady me. I could feel her support, her solidarity, but I could also sense her helplessness. This was not her child. She had no legal right to intervene, no matter how much she might want to. Victoria stood up, and I could see a flash of anger in her eyes now. You know what, Eleanor? I knew you would react like this. You always coddle her. Every time she comes to your house, you let her run wild, eat whatever she wants, stay up past her bedtime. You undermine every rule we try to establish. That is not true. It absolutely is true. Do you know what she told me last week? She said Grandma Eleanor lets me eat dessert before dinner. Grandma Eleanor says I do not have to brush my hair if I do not want to. I never said that. I would never say that. But you imply it, Victoria insisted. You make us look like the bad guys, the strict parents, while you get to be the fun grandmother who has no rules. Well, I am done with that. I am her mother, and I decide what is best for her. And what was best was to remove the source of all these morning battles. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to say something, to defend his daughter, to show some outrage at what his wife had done. But he just stood there, his jaw tight, his hands shoved in his pockets. The disappointment I felt in that moment was crushing. Marcus, I said quietly, you let this happen? He finally looked at me. Mom, you do not live with her. You do not see what the mornings are like. Victoria has been at her wit's end. So this was the solution? Traumatizing your daughter? She is not traumatized, Victoria snapped. She is fine. Look at her. Does she look traumatized to you? I looked at Lily again. She had gone back to playing with her blocks, but there was something subdued about her movements now, something careful. She was not singing to herself the way she usually did when she played. She was not narrating elaborate stories or making sound effects. She was just quietly stacking blocks, glancing occasionally at her mother as if checking for approval. David spoke for the first time. This is messed up, Victoria. You have to know this is messed up. His wife Amanda nodded. We talked about this before we came today. We almost did not come at all. Victoria's laugh was bitter now. Oh, so I am the villain. I am the terrible mother because I enforce discipline, because I teach my child that actions have consequences. There are consequences, and then there is cruelty, Jennifer said, her voice shaking. What you did was cruel. I felt something shift inside me in that moment. For years, I had been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over conflicts, who made excuses, who tried to see everyone's perspective. I had told myself that Victoria was just stressed, just particular, just trying to be a good mother in her own way. I had overlooked the controlling behaviors, the rigid schedules, the way she spoke to Lily sometimes like the child was an inconvenience rather than a blessing. But this crossed a line I could not uncross. This was not strict parenting. This was not even harsh discipline. This was something else entirely. This was about power and control, about breaking a child's spirit to make a parent's life easier. I walked over to where Lily sat on the floor and knelt down beside her, my knees protesting the movement. I ran my hand gently over her bare head, feeling the softness of her scalp, the vulnerability of it. Lily, sweetheart, how do you feel about your new haircut? She looked up at me with those big brown eyes, and I could see the confusion there, the hurt she did not have the words to express. Mommy says it will grow back. It will, baby. It definitely will. She says I was being difficult and I had to learn a lesson. My heart broke. What kind of lesson did she say you needed to learn? Lily's voice got smaller. That if I do not take care of my things, I lose them. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her small body against mine. Over her shoulder, I could see Victoria watching us with narrowed eyes, her arms crossed over her chest. I did not care. For once in my life, I did not care about keeping the peace. I stood up, still holding Lily's hand. Victoria, I need to speak with you and Marcus privately. In the kitchen, now. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped her. She exchanged a glance with Marcus, then nodded curtly. Fine. Jennifer immediately moved to sit with Lily. David and Amanda stayed on the couch, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. I led the way to the kitchen, Victoria and Marcus following behind me. Once we were alone, I turned to face them both. I kept my voice low, but firm. What you did to that child is unacceptable. It is abusive, and I will not pretend otherwise. Victoria's face flushed red. How dare you call me abusive? I have devoted my entire life to that child. Every single thing I do is for her benefit. Shaving her head because she did not want to brush her hair is not for her benefit. It is punishment masquerading as consequence, and it is cruel. Marcus finally found his voice. Mom, I know it seems harsh, but Victoria is right about the morning battles. They were getting out of control. I turned to my son, this man I had raised, this boy I had rocked to sleep and nursed through fevers and taught to ride a bike. So the solution was to humiliate your daughter? To take away her bodily autonomy? To make her feel like her own body parts are privileges that can be revoked? You are being dramatic, Victoria said coldly. It is just hair. It will grow back. It is not just hair. It is about what this teaches her. It teaches her that her body belongs to you, that you can do whatever you want to her if she does not comply with your demands. Do you understand what kind of precedent that sets? Victoria stepped closer to me. I have had enough of your judgment, Eleanor. You had your chance to raise your children your way. Now it is my turn. And quite frankly, given how Marcus turned out, unable to stand up for himself or make a decision without looking to his mother for approval, maybe your parenting was not as perfect as you think it was. The words stung because there was a grain of truth in them. I had always been close to Marcus, maybe too close. After his father died when he was 15, I had leaned on him emotionally in ways I should not have. I had made him the man of the house when he was still just a boy. Maybe that was why he struggled to stand up to Victoria now, why he seemed to defer to her on everything. But I could not let that truth stop me from speaking up now. My failings as a parent do not excuse what you have done. And if Marcus cannot see that, then I failed him worse than I thought. Marcus flinched. Mom, please. No, Marcus. I am done being quiet. I am done keeping the peace. That little girl in there deserves better. She deserves parents who treat her with dignity and respect, who understand that discipline does not mean humiliation. Victoria's voice was ice. Get out of my house. I looked at Marcus, giving him one last chance. Is this really what you want? You are really going to stand there and let your wife throw your mother out for defending your daughter? He looked torn, genuinely conflicted, but in the end, he said nothing. His silence was answer enough. I walked back into the living room. Jennifer and David looked up hopefully, but I just shook my head. I knelt down next to Lily one more time. Sweetheart, Grandma Eleanor has to go now. But I want you to know something very important, okay? She nodded, her eyes wide. Your hair was beautiful, and it will be beautiful again when it grows back. But what makes you special is not your hair. It is your kindness, your imagination, your wonderful laugh. Nobody can take those things away from you. Do you understand? I think so, Grandma. I hugged her tightly, breathing in her little girl smell, feeling the terrible vulnerability of her bare scalp under my palm. When I pulled back, I saw tears in her eyes. Are you mad at me too, Grandma? Oh, baby, no. I could never be mad at you. You did nothing wrong, nothing at all. I stood up and looked at my other children. Jennifer's face was wet with tears. David looked furious, his hands clenched into fists. I was proud of them both in that moment, proud that they saw this situation for what it was. I gathered my purse and walked to the door. Victoria appeared in the hallway, her expression triumphant. I guess we know where you stand. Yes, I said quietly. I guess we do. The drive home was a blur. I do not remember most of it. I just remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. Remember the way my vision kept blurring with tears. Remember pulling over twice because I was shaking too hard to drive safely. When I finally got home, I sat in my car in the driveway for almost 20 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. I had just been banned from seeing my granddaughter because I objected to child abuse. That sentence kept running through my mind on an endless loop. Banned from seeing my granddaughter, because I objected to child abuse. I went inside and immediately called my sister Margaret. She lived 3 states away, but we talked on the phone several times a week. She was the only person I felt I could tell about this without being judged for how I had handled it. Margaret answered on the 3rd ring. Eleanor, how was the family gathering? I started crying before I could get a single word out. Once I started, I could not stop. Great. Heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest, years of suppressed concerns and overlooked red flags all coming out at once. Margaret's voice shifted immediately from cheerful to concerned. What happened? Eleanor, talk to me. What is going on? It took me almost 10 minutes to get the whole story out. Margaret listened without interrupting, which was unlike her. Usually, she had opinions to share every few sentences, but this time, she just let me talk, let me get it all out. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, Margaret spoke, and her voice was shaking with anger. That woman shaved that baby's head, completely bald, and Marcus just let her? He did more than let her. He defended her. He stood there and defended her. What are you going to do? I do not know. I honestly do not know. What can I do? She is not my child. They are her parents. Legally, I have no rights here. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. There are organizations, Eleanor, organizations that help grandparents who have been cut off from their grandchildren. And if there is abuse or neglect, there are steps you can take. You think I should pursue legal action? Against my own son? I think you should explore your options. That child needs someone in her corner, and it sounds like you are the only one willing to be there. After I hung up with Margaret, I sat in my living room as the afternoon faded into evening. I did not turn on any lights. I just sat there in the growing darkness, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. I thought about all the times I had noticed Victoria being too strict, too controlling, the way she scheduled every minute of Lily's day, leaving no room for spontaneous play or unstructured time, the way she criticized the child's artwork, pointing out mistakes instead of celebrating creativity, the way she enforced rigid meal times and bedtimes, even on weekends and holidays, the way she spoke about Lily's personality traits as problems to be fixed rather than quirks to be embraced. I had seen all of this. I had noticed it. But I had said nothing, told myself it was not my place to interfere, convinced myself that every family had different parenting styles and who was I to judge. I had chosen peace over truth, comfort over courage. And now a 6-year-old child was paying the price for my cowardice. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I had not felt in years. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat down at my computer, and started researching. I found websites for grandparents' rights, support groups for families dealing with parental alienation, resources about child welfare laws in our state. The more I read, the more complicated I realized the situation was. In our state, grandparents could petition for visitation rights, but only under specific circumstances. The fact that I had been an active part of Lily's life and that the parents were now denying access was relevant, but courts generally sided with parental rights unless there was clear evidence of harm to the child. Was there clear evidence of harm? Victoria had not hit Lily. She had not starved her or left her unsupervised. She had made a parenting decision that I found horrifying and cruel, but would a judge see it that way? Or would they see it as an overzealous grandmother interfering in her son's family? I spent 3 days researching, making notes, and wrestling with what to do. Jennifer called me every day, and David called twice. Both of them were furious about what had happened and wanted to know what I was planning. But I could not give them answers because I did not have any yet. During those 3 days, I found myself going through old photo albums, pictures of Lily as a baby, her first birthday, her second Christmas opening presents. There were dozens of photos of her with those beautiful curls. I remembered the first time I had braided her hair, how she had sat so still and proud. I also started keeping a detailed timeline of everything I could remember about Victoria's parenting over the past 5 years. The time Lily was 3 and Victoria put her in timeout for 30 minutes because she spilled juice, even though it was clearly an accident. The way Victoria controlled every aspect of Lily's wardrobe, the rigid meal schedule, the way Victoria monitored Lily's friendships based on the parent's social status. Individually, these things might seem like the actions of a strict but well-meaning parent. But together, they painted a picture of a woman who saw her daughter as an extension of herself, a project to be perfected rather than a person to be nurtured. I also remembered conversations I had dismissed at the time. Once, when Lily was 4, she had asked me why her mommy got so angry when she made mistakes. Another time, when she was 5, she had told me that she tried very hard to be good so mommy would be happy. How many warning signs had I ignored? How many times had I chosen comfort over confrontation? Jennifer came over on the evening of the 3rd day. She found me at my dining room table, surrounded by papers and printouts and notes. "Mom, you need to take a break." "You have been obsessing over this for days." "I cannot stop thinking about her, Jennifer. Every time I close my eyes, I see her little face." My daughter sat down across from me. She picked up one of my research printouts and read it silently. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "This is really well researched, Mom. You have been thorough." Jennifer reached across the table and took my hand. "You know what David said to me yesterday? He said he wishes he had your courage. He said he is glad you are willing to be the bad guy if it means someone stands up for Lily. I do not feel courageous. I feel terrified. Courage is not the absence of fear, Mom. It is acting despite the fear. And that is exactly what you are doing." That night, I slept better than I had in days. I had not made a final decision yet, but I had clarified what was at stake. And I had reminded myself that hard choices were still choices, that I had agency even in a situation that felt overwhelming. On the fourth day, I received an email from Marcus. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I stared at it for almost an hour before opening it. When I finally did, the message was brief. "Mom, Victoria and I have discussed the situation, and we think it would be best if we take some space from you for a while. You crossed a line by calling Victoria abusive in her own home, and we need time to process that. We hope you can eventually see that we are doing our best as parents, even if our methods do not align with yours. Please respect our decision and give us the space we have requested. Marcus." I read it 3 times. The formal tone, the obvious signs that Victoria had either written it or heavily edited it, the complete absence of any acknowledgement that they might have done something wrong. It was like being slapped. I wrote back immediately, my fingers shaking on the keyboard. "Marcus, I cannot respect a decision that harms Lily. What Victoria did was wrong, and I will not pretend otherwise. If you need space from me, that is your choice. But I will not stop trying to ensure that my granddaughter is safe and healthy. I am your mother, and I will always tell you the truth, even when you do not want to hear it. I love you, and I love Lily, and I hope you will eventually see that standing up for what is right is not the same as being unsupportive. Mom." He never responded. The following week was one of the darkest of my life. I felt paralyzed by indecision. Should I file for visitation rights? Should I call Child Protective Services? Should I try to reach out to Marcus again? Maybe take a softer approach? Every option seemed fraught with potential for making things worse. Jennifer came over one evening with a bottle of wine and a determined expression. We sat on my back porch as the sun set, and she poured us both generous glasses. "Mom, you know I support whatever you decide to do, right? I know, sweetheart, but you need to decide something. You cannot just sit here drowning in guilt and uncertainty. It is eating you alive. I am scared, Jennifer. I am scared that if I push too hard, I will lose Marcus forever. I am scared that if I do not push hard enough, Lily will suffer. I am scared that I already failed her by not speaking up sooner." Jennifer set down her wine glass and took my hand. "You did not fail her. You saw red flags, yes, but none of us knew it would escalate to this. Victoria always seemed controlling, but not abusive. There is a difference between being strict and being cruel, and she crossed that line. Now you know, and now you have to act. What would you do, if it were your child?" My daughter was quiet for a long moment. I would document everything. I would keep records of every concerning behavior, every instance of excessive control or harsh punishment. And I would consult with a family law attorney to understand my options. I would not necessarily jump straight to legal action, but I would be prepared. It was good advice, practical, concrete. I felt some of the paralysis lifting. The next day, I made an appointment with a family law attorney that Jennifer recommended. Her name was Patricia Holloway, and she had 30 years of experience in family court. The consultation was 2 days later. I sat in Patricia's comfortable office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials, and told her everything. She listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Mrs. Thompson, I am going to be honest with you about what you are facing. Grandparents' rights cases are difficult. Courts strongly favor parental autonomy, which means they generally let parents make parenting decisions, even if those decisions seem misguided to others. Even decisions like shaving a child's head as punishment?" Patricia nodded. "Even that." Unless we can demonstrate a pattern of abuse or neglect that rises to the level of endangering the child's welfare, a judge is unlikely to override the parent's wishes. So I have no options? I did not say that. You have options, but they require careful consideration of the potential consequences. We could file a petition for grandparent visitation. Given that you have been a significant presence in Lily's life, and that the parents have now cut off contact without a clear reason related to the child's welfare, we might have a case. But be prepared for a long, expensive legal battle that could permanently damage your relationship with your son. What if I called Child Protective Services? Patricia's expression was carefully neutral. That is always an option, but I need to be frank with you. What you have described, while concerning, might not meet the threshold for CPS intervention. They are overwhelmed with cases of severe abuse and neglect. A parent who shaved their child's head as discipline, as upsetting as that is, might not trigger an investigation or might result in a brief visit that finds no actionable concerns. I felt tears prickling my eyes. So basically, I have to choose between doing nothing and potentially losing my son, or taking action that might not help Lily, but will definitely destroy my relationship with Marcus. Patricia leaned forward. Mrs. Thompson, I have been practicing family law for a long time. I have seen a lot of complicated situations. And one thing I have learned is that sometimes the bravest thing a grandparent can do is be a steady, consistent presence, even from a distance. Even if you cannot see Lily right now, there will come a time when she is older, when she can make her own choices about relationships. The foundation you have built with her in her first 6 years of life will still be there. But what if Victoria damages her beyond repair in the meantime? What if staying quiet now means Lily suffers for years? Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "There is another option. You could write a letter to Marcus and Victoria. Not accusatory, not threatening legal action, but expressing your concerns as a grandmother and as someone who loves Lily deeply." Sometimes, when the heat of the moment passes, people become more receptive to hearing difficult truths. You think that would work? I think it is worth trying before you pursue legal options. Give them a chance to hear you without the pressure of an audience or the emotion of that confrontational moment. I left Patricia's office with a lot to think about. The idea of writing a letter appealed to me. It gave me a chance to say everything I needed to say without interruption, without the immediate defensive reactions that had shut down our conversation at the family gathering. I spent the next 2 days crafting that letter. I wrote and rewrote it dozens of times. I wanted to be honest without being cruel, firm without being judgmental, loving without being manipulative. It was the hardest writing I had ever done. The final version was 3 pages long. I printed it out and read it aloud to Jennifer before mailing it. She cried when I finished reading. "Mom, this is beautiful. If this does not reach them, nothing will." I mailed it the next day, certified mail so I would know when they received it. Then I waited. 3 days later, I got the notification that the letter had been delivered. I waited another 3 days for a response. Nothing came. A week passed, then 2 weeks. Jennifer reported that she had tried texting Marcus multiple times, but he was not responding to her either. David said the same thing. Victoria had effectively cut Marcus off from his entire family, not just me. I fell into a depression. I stopped going to my book club, stopped attending my water aerobics class, stopped calling my friends. I just stayed home, moving through the days mechanically, cooking meals I did not eat, watching television shows I did not remember. The house felt too quiet. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of Lily. The small apron she used when we baked together, still hanging on a hook in the kitchen. The drawer full of crayons and coloring books I kept for her visits. The step stool in the bathroom that she used to reach the sink. The collection of children's books on the shelf in the guest room. I found myself standing in that guest room one afternoon, just staring at the bed where Lily used to sleep when she stayed overnight. We had decorated it together when she was 4, picking out the purple comforter with stars on it, hanging the fairy lights around the mirror, placing stuffed animals carefully on the pillows. She had been so proud of her special room at Grandma's house. How long would it be before she forgot about this room? Before she forgot about me? I started having trouble sleeping. I would lie awake at night, my mind racing through all the ways I could have handled the situation differently. Should I have been calmer at the family gathering? Should I have tried to have a private conversation with Marcus first instead of confronting them in front of everyone? Should I have built a stronger relationship with Victoria over the years so that maybe she would have listened to my concerns? The what-ifs were endless and exhausting, but underneath all of them was a deeper fear. What if I had destroyed my relationship with Marcus for nothing? What if Victoria was not actually abusive, just strict? What if I had overreacted, let my emotions cloud my judgment, and now I had torn apart my family based on a misunderstanding? But then I would remember the look on Lily's face, the vulnerability of her bare scalp, the careful way she had glanced at her mother before speaking. And I would know in my gut that I had not overreacted. Something was wrong in that house, and the head shaving was just the most visible symptom of a deeper problem. Jennifer and David tried to pull me out of it. They visited regularly, brought me groceries, tried to engage me in conversation. Jennifer would show up with coffee and pastries, sit at my kitchen table, and tell me firmly that I needed to shower and get dressed. David would arrive unannounced and insist I go for a walk with him around the neighborhood. I appreciated their efforts, but I could not shake the darkness that had settled over me. I had spent my entire adult life being the strong one, the caregiver, the person others leaned on. Now I was the one falling apart, and I did not know how to ask for help. I stopped answering calls from my friends. When my book club president called to check on me, I let it go to voicemail. When my water aerobics instructor sent a text asking if I was okay, I replied with a brief excuse about not feeling well. I isolated myself, partly because I did not have the energy to explain what was happening, and partly because I was ashamed of how much this had broken me. One morning, about 3 weeks after I had mailed the letter, I woke up and could not find a reason to get out of bed. Not in the dramatic, suicidal sense, but in the simple sense that nothing seemed to matter. What was the point of showering, of eating breakfast, of going through the motions of a normal day? I had failed at the thing that mattered most to me, protecting my granddaughter, and now I was just existing without purpose. I stayed in bed until almost noon. I might have stayed there all day if Jennifer had not let herself in with her spare key and come upstairs to find me. "Mom, what are you doing? It is almost lunchtime. I know what time it is." She sat down on the edge of the bed and looked at me with concern that made me want to cry. "When was the last time you showered? Or ate a real meal? I do not remember." "Okay, that is it. You are getting up, you are getting cleaned up, and then you are coming downstairs. I made sandwiches." "Jennifer, I just want to be left alone." "Well, too bad. You do not get that option." "You have spent 3 weeks wallowing, and I understand why, but it has to stop now. Lily still needs you, even if you cannot see her right now. How does she need me? I cannot help her. I tried, and I failed. You have not failed. You have just hit a setback. There is a difference." My daughter physically pulled back the covers and stood there with her arms crossed until I got up. She followed me to the bathroom and waited outside while I showered. It felt like being a child again, being monitored and managed, but I also knew she was right. I had let myself spiral too far down. The hot water helped. Standing under the spray, washing my hair, going through the familiar routine of self-care, it grounded me a little. When I emerged, dressed in clean clothes with my hair combed, Jennifer hugged me tightly. "There is my mom," she said softly. "I have missed you." We went downstairs and ate the sandwiches she had made. She told me about her kids, about a funny thing her youngest had said, about a project at work. Normal, everyday conversation that reminded me there was a world beyond my grief. But you know what, Mom? She said as she was clearing our plates. I think you need more help than David and I can give you. Have you thought about talking to a therapist? I am fine, Jennifer. You are not fine. You are depressed, which is completely understandable given what you are going through, but it is not something you should face alone. I do not need therapy. I just need time. She looked at me steadily. How much time? Another 3 weeks of lying in bed? Another month of not answering your phone? At what point do you admit that you need support? I did not have an answer for that. The truth was, I had always been the person who provided support, not the one who received it. The idea of sitting in a therapist's office, talking about my feelings, felt weak and self-indulgent. But Jennifer saw through me, the way she always did. Asking for help is not weak, Mom. You taught me that. Remember when I was going through my divorce and I did not want to see a counselor because I thought it meant I was failing? You told me that getting help was the strongest thing I could do. Your own advice applies to you too. She was right, of course. But knowing she was right and actually making the call to schedule an appointment were two different things. It was Margaret who finally broke through to me. She flew in for a surprise visit 3 weeks after I mailed the letter. She showed up at my door with her suitcase, walked right in, and immediately started opening curtains and windows. Enough of this, she announced. You have wallowed long enough. Now we are going to figure out what comes next. There is nothing that comes next, Margaret. I tried. I failed. Now I just have to live with it. My sister turned to face me, hands on her hips. Her expression was fierce, the way it had been when we were children and someone tried to bully me on the playground. Margaret had always been my protector, 5 years older and infinitely more confident. Eleanor Thompson, I have known you for 63 years. I have seen you survive our father's temper, Mom's cancer, losing your husband when your kids were still young. I have watched you put yourself through nursing school while working full-time and raising 3 children alone. I have seen you handle emergencies in intensive care units with calm competence. You are not a quitter, and you are not a failure. So stop acting like one. Her words hit me like cold water. She was right. I had survived so much worse than this, and giving up now did not just hurt me. It hurt Lily too. Margaret stayed for 5 days, and they were exactly what I needed. She helped me clean my house from top to bottom, scrubbing away the physical manifestations of my depression. She restocked my refrigerator with actual food, not just the random items I had been surviving on. She dragged me to my water aerobics class, where my instructor and classmates welcomed me back without asking uncomfortable questions. In the evenings, we sat on my back porch with glasses of wine and talked, not just about the situation with Lily and Marcus, but about everything. Our childhood, our parents, the choices we had made, the regrets we carried, the hopes we still held. You know what I have been thinking about? Margaret said one evening as the sun set behind the trees. I have been thinking about the day you decided to leave Dad's house and move in with me while you finished high school. I had forgotten about that. It felt like a lifetime ago. You were 16, she continued. Dad was getting worse, more unpredictable, and you finally had enough. You showed up at my apartment with one suitcase and said you were not going back. Do you remember what I asked you? I shook my head. I asked if you were sure because leaving meant losing your relationship with him, probably permanently. And do you know what you said? What? You said some relationships are not worth keeping if they require you to lose yourself. You were 16 years old, and you already understood that sometimes you have to choose your own well-being over family peace. I had forgotten that conversation, but hearing Margaret recount it brought it back vividly. I remembered the fear I had felt, the guilt, but also the clarity that I could not stay in that house any longer. This is the same thing, Mom, Margaret said, using the nickname she only used when she wanted to emphasize a point. You are choosing Lily's well-being over family peace. You are doing the brave thing, the hard thing, just like you did when you were 16. But I do not feel brave. I feel broken. Broken people can still be brave. In fact, some of the bravest things anyone ever does are done while they are falling apart. On Margaret's last evening, she sat me down and made me promise 3 things. First, that I would call a therapist. Second, that I would stop isolating myself from my friends and activities. Third, that I would not give up on Lily, no matter how hopeless things seemed. I promise, I told her, and I meant it. After she left, I kept those promises. I found a therapist who specialized in family conflict and grief. Her name was Dr. Susan Chen, and she was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who had a way of asking questions that cut right to the heart of things. In our first session, she asked me what I was most afraid of. I thought about it for a long time before answering. I am afraid that I have ruined Marcus's life, that he will never forgive me, and that I will die without ever having repaired our relationship. And what else? I am afraid that I did all of this for nothing, that Lily will still suffer, and my sacrifice will not have mattered. Dr. Chen nodded. Those are valid fears, but let me ask you something. If you could go back to that day at the family gathering, knowing everything you know now about how it would turn out, would you do anything differently? I sat with that question. Would I? Knowing that it would lead to months of estrangement, legal battles, depression, would I still confront Victoria? No, I said finally. I would not do anything differently, because the alternative was doing nothing, and I could not live with that. Then you have your answer, Dr. Chen said. You made the choice you could live with. Now you need to learn to live with the consequences of that choice, which is different from regretting the choice itself. Her words hit me like cold water. She was right. I had survived so much worse than this, and giving up now did not just hurt me. It hurt Lily too. I sat up straighter. Okay. You are right. So what do I do? Margaret sat down across from me. First, you start taking care of yourself again. You cannot help anyone if you are falling apart. Second, you accept that you might not be able to fix this situation, at least not right now. But that does not mean you stop trying. It means you try differently. What does that mean? It means you document everything. You stay in touch with Jennifer and David. Make sure they keep trying to reach Marcus too. You wait and watch, and if things escalate, if there are more signs of abuse, then you act. But right now, you focus on being ready for when Lily needs you, because eventually, she will. My sister stayed for 5 days. She helped me clean my house, restocked my refrigerator, dragged me to my water aerobics class, and sat with me every evening while we watched old movies and ate popcorn. By the time she left, I felt like myself again. Still sad, still worried, still angry, but no longer paralyzed. I started a journal. Every day I wrote down the date and documented anything I learned about Lily's situation. When Jennifer mentioned that she saw them at the grocery store and Lily looked thin, I wrote it down. When David reported that a neighbor of Marcus and Victoria said they heard a lot of yelling from the house, I wrote it down. When Victoria posted on social media about the importance of discipline and respect, I screenshotted it and printed it out. I did not know if I would ever need this documentation, but I followed Patricia's advice and kept careful records. I also started volunteering at a local organization that helped families in crisis. If I could not help my own granddaughter right now, at least I could help other children in need. The weeks turned into months. Halloween passed, then Thanksgiving. Marcus did not respond to my invitation to join us for the holiday. According to Jennifer, he and Victoria took Lily to Victoria's parents' house instead. Christmas approached, and I still had not seen or heard from them. I bought gifts for Lily anyway. I wrapped them carefully and stored them in my closet, hoping that someday I would be able to give them to her. The thought of her opening presents on Christmas morning without anything from me made my chest ache. 2 days before Christmas, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was still in bed, and I almost did not answer because it was an unknown number. But something made me pick up. A woman's voice said, "Is this Eleanor Thompson?" "Yes, this is she." "Mrs. Thompson, this is Cassandra Mills. I am a teacher at Brookside Elementary School. I have Lily Campbell in my first grade class." My heart started pounding. Is she okay? Did something happen? The teacher's voice was careful, professional. "Mrs. Thompson, I am calling because Lily has been exhibiting some concerning behaviors at school, and when I asked her who she felt safe talking to, she mentioned you. I know this is unusual, but I wanted to reach out because I think Lily needs support right now." "What kind of behaviors?" "She has become very withdrawn. She does not interact with other children during free play. She has had several incidents of crying in class for no apparent reason. And yesterday, she asked me if hair grows back when people cut it off, which I found troubling given that she has very short hair that appears to have been recently cut." I closed my eyes. "It has been growing back. It has been 3 months since they shaved it." "I see. Mrs. Thompson, I cannot discuss specific details about what might be happening at home, but I wanted you to know that we are keeping an eye on the situation. If you have any concerns about Lily's welfare, please do not hesitate to contact the appropriate authorities." After I hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, shaking. The teacher was essentially telling me that she suspected something was wrong, but could not take action without more evidence. She was giving me permission, encouraging me even, to do something. I called Patricia immediately. When I told her about the phone call, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "This changes things. A teacher's professional concern about a child's welfare carries weight. Combined with what happened with the hair shaving and your documentation of other concerning behaviors, we might have enough to file for visitation rights or to prompt a welfare check. What do I do? Come to my office this afternoon. Bring your documentation. Let me review everything and we will make a plan." I spent the morning organizing all my notes, printing out emails and text messages, gathering everything I had documented over the past 3 months. When I arrived at Patricia's office that afternoon, I had a 2-inch thick folder of materials. Patricia went through everything methodically. She asked me questions, made notes, occasionally nodded or frowned. After almost 2 hours, she closed the folder and looked at me. "Mrs. Thompson, I believe we have enough here to file a petition for grandparent visitation. I also think we should file a report with Child Protective Services. The combination of the hair shaving incident, the teacher's concerns, and the pattern of controlling behavior you have documented paints a picture that warrants investigation. What happens next? I will draft the petition, which will take about a week. In the meantime, I strongly encourage you to file that CPS report. You can do it anonymously, although given the circumstances, your son and daughter-in-law will probably suspect it came from you. I do not care if they know it was me. I care about Lily." Patricia smiled. That is exactly the right attitude. I filed the report that evening. The online form asked detailed questions about the child's age, address, and what concerns I had about their welfare. I described the head shaving incident, mentioned the teacher's concerns, detailed Victoria's pattern of excessive control and rigid discipline. I tried to be factual and specific, avoiding emotional language even though every word felt charged with the fear and anger I had been carrying for months. After I submitted the report, I felt oddly calm. I had finally taken action. Whatever happened next, at least I had done something. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Jennifer, David, and their families. We had a nice day, but Lily's absence was a gaping hole in the celebration. Her unopened presents sat under my tree at home, a reminder of everything that had been lost. 3 days after Christmas, I got a call from a CPS caseworker named Thomas Grant. He informed me that they had received my report and conducted an initial visit to the Campbell home. He could not share details of what they found, but he said the case remained open pending further investigation. I asked him what that meant for Lily, if she was safe. He told me that the child was not in immediate danger and remained in the home, but that they would be conducting follow-up visits and working with the family on a safety plan. It was not the answer I wanted, but it was something. At least now there were professional eyes on the situation. At least Victoria and Marcus knew they were being watched. 2 weeks later, I received a furious phone call from Marcus. It was the first time I had heard his voice in 4 months, and he was shouting before I even finished saying hello. How could you do this? How could you call CPS on us? Do you have any idea what you have put us through? I kept my voice steady. I did what I had to do to protect Lily. You did not protect anyone. You humiliated us. They came to our house, demanded to see Lily, looked through her room, asked her all these questions that scared her. And for what? Because Victoria gave her a short haircut? She did not give her a short haircut, Marcus. She shaved her head completely bald as punishment. There is a difference. It was our decision as her parents. It was a cruel decision, and I will not apologize for trying to stop you from making more cruel decisions in the future. Marcus was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was cold. You have destroyed our family, Mom. I hope you are happy. He hung up before I could respond. I sat there holding the phone, tears streaming down my face. Jennifer's words came back to me, the question she had asked months ago. What would you do if it were your child? I had done what I had to do, but knowing that did not make it hurt any less. Patricia filed the petition for grandparent visitation in mid-January. Marcus and Victoria were served with the legal papers, which meant they had to respond within a certain time frame. Patricia warned me that they would likely hire their own attorney and fight it aggressively. She was right. 3 weeks later, we received their response. It was a 20-page document that painted me as an interfering, boundary-violating grandmother who could not accept that her son had grown up and made his own family. It accused me of alienating Marcus from his siblings by manipulating them into taking my side. It claimed that my call to CPS was malicious and unfounded, an attempt to use state resources to force my way back into their lives. Reading it felt like being stabbed repeatedly. Much of it was exaggeration or outright fabrication, but some of it contained kernels of truth twisted into something ugly. I had been very close to Marcus growing up. I had maintained strong relationships with all my children and their families. I did call CPS. They took these facts and weaponized them, turning my love into manipulation and my concern into malice. Patricia told me not to worry, that this was standard adversarial legal strategy. But I worried anyway. What if a judge saw it the way they presented it? What if I really was overstepping, interfering in ways I did not even recognize? I called Margaret that night. I need you to tell me the truth. Am I wrong about this? Am I making everything worse? My sister did not hesitate. No, you are not wrong. What Victoria did to that child was cruel, and what Marcus did by allowing it was cowardly. You are fighting for someone who cannot fight for herself, and that is never wrong. But what if the judge does not see it that way? Then the judge is wrong too. But at least you will know you tried everything you could. You will know you did not sit silently by while your granddaughter suffered. The court date was set for late March, almost 6 months after the initial incident at the family gathering. Those months were some of the longest of my life. I went through my days in a fog of anxiety, constantly second-guessing every decision I had made. Jennifer and David were both called to testify. They spent hours with Patricia, going over their statements, preparing for cross-examination. Jennifer was nervous but determined. David was angry, ready to tell the judge exactly what he thought of Victoria's parenting. Patricia coached him on controlling his temper. You are passionate, and that is good, but you need to channel it appropriately. Answer the questions asked, stick to the facts, and do not let their attorney provoke you into an outburst. The week before the hearing, something unexpected happened. Cassandra Mills, Lily's teacher, reached out to Patricia directly. She offered to provide a statement about her concerns regarding Lily's emotional state and behavioral changes at school. She could not testify in person because the school district did not want to get involved in family court proceedings, but she could submit a written affidavit. It was a huge break. Having a teacher's professional observation added credibility to my concerns. It made it harder for Marcus and Victoria to dismiss everything as a vindictive grandmother's exaggeration. The night before the hearing, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that led to this moment. I thought about little Lily, now 7 years old, her hair grown back into an awkward, uneven bob. I thought about Marcus, the boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street, now looking at me like I was the enemy. I thought about all the ways families break and sometimes never fully heal. But I also thought about courage, about the difference between keeping peace and keeping silent in the face of harm. I thought about the kind of grandmother I wanted to be, the kind of woman I wanted to be, and I knew, regardless of what happened in that courtroom, I had made the right choice. The hearing took place in a small courtroom on the 3rd floor of the county courthouse. Patricia and I arrived early. Jennifer and David met us there, both dressed formally, both looking nervous. We sat together on the wooden benches, waiting for our case to be called. When Marcus and Victoria arrived with their attorney, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Victoria looked polished and composed in a navy suit, her blonde hair perfect. Marcus would not meet my eyes. Their attorney, a thin man with silver hair and an expensive-looking briefcase, nodded curtly in our direction. Judge Catherine Morrison presided over the case. She was a woman in her late 50s with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She called the court to order and asked both attorneys to present their opening statements. Victoria and Marcus's attorney went first. He painted them as loving, dedicated parents who had made a difficult disciplinary choice that, while perhaps controversial, fell well within the bounds of reasonable parenting. He portrayed me as an overbearing grandmother who could not accept that her son had built a life independent of her influence. He suggested that my petition was motivated by a desire to control rather than genuine concern for Lily's welfare. Then Patricia presented our side. She spoke calmly and clearly about the pattern of excessive control, the escalating nature of Victoria's discipline, the incident with the head shaving that went beyond reasonable correction. She referenced the teacher's affidavit, the CPS investigation, my documentation of concerning behaviors. She argued that I was not seeking to control my son's family, but to maintain a relationship with my granddaughter that was in the child's best interest. The judge listened to both sides without expression. Then she began calling witnesses. I was called first. I walked to the witness stand on shaking legs and swore to tell the truth. Patricia led me through my testimony gently, asking about my relationship with Lily before the incident, the day of the family gathering, my attempts to communicate with Marcus and Victoria afterward. Then their attorney cross-examined me. He tried to make me look vindictive and controlling, suggesting that I had always disapproved of Victoria and that this was just my latest attempt to undermine their marriage. He brought up things I had said years ago, casual comments about Victoria being particular or strict, and tried to use them to show a pattern of judgment. But I stayed calm. I answered honestly. Yes, I had noticed that Victoria's parenting style was very strict. No, I had never expressed those concerns to her directly before the head shaving incident. Yes, I wish I had spoken up sooner. Yes, my primary motivation was and always had been Lily's well-being. After me came Jennifer. She testified about being at the family gathering, about Lily's demeanor afterward, about the concerns she and I had discussed. She was poised and articulate, and the opposing attorney struggled to shake her testimony. David was more emotional but equally effective. He talked about being shocked when he saw Lily, about the way Victoria laughed when she said Lily had it coming, about his own daughter and how he could never imagine treating her that way. The opposing attorney tried to discredit both of them by suggesting they were simply siding with their mother, but it did not work. The sincerity of their concern was evident. Then Marcus took the stand. It was painful to watch him defend Victoria's actions, to hear him describe the morning battles over hairbrushing as if they justified what had been done. He claimed Lily was fine now, that her hair had grown back, that the whole thing had been blown out of proportion. But under Patricia's cross-examination, cracks appeared in his testimony. He admitted that he had been uncomfortable with the decision initially. He admitted that Lily's teacher had expressed concerns. He admitted that his mother had never been anything but loving and supportive of Lily. Finally, Victoria testified. She was polished and confident, insisting that she had done nothing wrong, that the head shaving was a last resort after exhausting all other options. She claimed that I had poisoned her relationship with her husband's family, that I had never accepted her as Marcus's wife, that everything I had done was motivated by a desire to destroy her marriage. Patricia was surgical in her cross-examination. She brought up the teacher's affidavit, the CPS visit, my documentation of other concerning incidents. She asked Victoria if she thought shaving a 6-year-old child's head completely bald was an appropriate consequence for not wanting to brush her hair. Victoria's composure cracked slightly. She insisted it was, that sometimes children needed dramatic consequences to learn important lessons. What lesson was Lily supposed to learn? Patricia asked. That she has to take care of her responsibilities. By having her bodily autonomy violated? By being humiliated? Victoria's attorney objected, and the judge sustained it, but the point had been made. After all the testimony, the judge called a recess to review the materials and make her decision. We waited in a small conference room, none of us speaking much. Jennifer held my hand. David paced. Patricia reviewed her notes. 2 hours later, we were called back into the courtroom. Judge Morrison looked at all of us with an unreadable expression. Then she began to speak. I have reviewed all the testimony and materials presented in this case. This is a difficult situation because it involves fundamental questions about parental rights, the role of extended family members, and what constitutes appropriate discipline. My heart sank. That phrasing usually preceded a ruling against grandparents' rights. But the judge continued. However, I cannot ignore the concerning pattern of behavior described here. The incident in which the child's head was completely shaved as punishment for not wanting to brush her hair strikes me as excessive and potentially emotionally harmful. The testimony from the child's teacher regarding behavioral changes, combined with the documentation provided by the petitioner, suggests that there are legitimate concerns about the child's emotional welfare. I held my breath. That said, I do not find that the situation rises to the level of removing the child from the parent's custody or significantly limiting their parental rights. The parents clearly love their daughter and provide for her material needs. However, I do believe that maintaining a relationship with her grandmother is in Lily's best interest, particularly given the close bond they shared before this incident. Therefore, I am granting the petition for grandparent visitation, but on a limited basis. Eleanor Thompson will be allowed supervised visits with Lily Campbell twice per month, 2 hours per visit, with supervision to be provided by a neutral third party selected by the parents from a court-approved list. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months to determine if unsupervised visitation is appropriate. Additionally, I am ordering that the family engage in family counseling to address the communication breakdown and to provide guidance on appropriate disciplinary measures. The parents will provide proof of attendance at these counseling sessions at the 6-month review. Victoria looked furious. Marcus looked shell-shocked. But I felt a wave of relief so intense I almost started crying right there in the courtroom. I had won. Not a complete victory, but enough. I would get to see Lily again. She would know that I had not abandoned her. After the hearing, Patricia squeezed my arm. "It is a good ruling, Eleanor. Better than I expected, honestly. I can see her again. You can see her again. Now we just need to make sure those visits are meaningful and that you rebuild that relationship carefully." The first supervised visit was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The supervisor would be a woman named Helen Ramirez, a social worker who specialized in family reunification cases. The visit would take place at a neutral location, a family services office with a play area. I spent those 3 weeks in an agony of anticipation and nervousness. What would I say to Lily? Would she be happy to see me? Would she be angry that I had been gone for so long? Would Victoria have poisoned her against me? The day of the visit, I arrived 30 minutes early. Helen Ramirez met me in the waiting area. She was a kind-faced woman in her 40s with warm brown eyes. "Mrs. Thompson, I want you to know that my role here is not to judge you or the parents. I am here to facilitate a positive experience for Lily. Let her set the pace. Do not push her to talk about what has been happening at home. Just be her grandmother." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. When Lily arrived with Marcus, my heart clenched. She was so much taller than the last time I had seen her. Her hair had grown into a shaggy, uneven bob that someone had clearly tried to trim into something presentable, but failed. She wore a purple dress with white leggings and looked terribly nervous. Marcus deposited her in the room and left without saying a word to me. Lily stood near the door, uncertain, until Helen gently guided her toward where I sat on the floor near the toy area. "Hi, sweetheart," I said softly. "I have missed you so much." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then her face crumpled, and she ran toward me, throwing her arms around my neck. I held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her, feeling her small body shake with sobs. "I thought you did not love me anymore," she cried. "I thought you left because I was bad. Oh, baby, no. Never, never. I have loved you every single day. I have thought about you every single day. I could never stop loving you." We sat like that for a long time, her in my lap, me rocking her gently while she cried. Helen watched quietly from her chair in the corner, making notes but giving us space. Eventually, Lily pulled back and looked at my face. She reached up and touched my cheek. "You are crying too, Grandma." "I am, because I am so happy to see you." She touched her own short hair self-consciously. "My hair got ugly." "Your hair is not ugly. It is growing, and it will be beautiful just like you. Mommy says I should have taken better care of it." I chose my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that we do not understand. But what is important is that you know you are loved and you are precious, no matter what your hair looks like. We spent the rest of the visit playing with toys, reading books, and just talking. She told me about first grade, about a friend named Sophie who sat next to her, about how she was learning to read chapter books. She seemed more subdued than I remembered, more careful with her words, but the core of her personality was still there. When the 2 hours were up and Marcus came to pick her up, Lily hugged me tightly again. "Can you come back, Grandma?" "I will, in 2 weeks, I promise." The visits continued every 2 weeks. Slowly, over the course of months, Lily began to relax around me again. She smiled more, laughed more, started to tell me things about her daily life without seeming afraid of saying the wrong thing. Each visit revealed a little more about how she was doing. She mentioned that she was not allowed to have dessert anymore. She told me about a friend at school who was no longer allowed to come over. She asked me questions about my own childhood, about whether my mother had been strict, about whether I had been afraid of making mistakes. "Grandma Eleanor, did you ever get in trouble when you were little?" "Of course I did, sweetheart. All children make mistakes. That is how we learn. Mommy says mistakes mean I am not trying hard enough." "Oh, honey, that is not true. Mistakes mean you are learning and trying new things." As the months progressed, I noticed other changes. She was more hesitant to try new things, always asking first if it was okay. She apologized constantly, even for things that did not require apology. When she accidentally knocked over a cup of juice during one visit, she immediately burst into tears and started apologizing frantically. "It is okay, Lily. Accidents happen. You are not in trouble." But I made a mess. I was not being careful enough. That incident convinced me that what was happening at home went beyond strict parenting. Lily was developing hypervigilance, excessive apologizing, fear of making mistakes. She was walking on eggshells, constantly monitoring herself to avoid triggering her mother's anger. I documented all of this in my journal. Patricia had told me to keep records, and I took that instruction seriously. But documentation was not enough. I wanted to help her, to give her tools she could use to cope. "Lily, you know what I think is special about you? I think you are kind and creative and brave. And those things are true whether you make mistakes or not, whether your hair is long or short. Those things are part of who you are, and nobody can take them away from you. Even if Mommy is angry with me, even then. Because your worth does not depend on whether someone else is happy with you." Marcus remained cold and distant, but he followed the court order. Victoria never came to the pickups or drop-offs, which I considered a blessing. According to Jennifer, who had managed to rebuild some minimal contact with Marcus, they were attending the court-ordered family counseling, but Victoria was resistant to any suggestion that her parenting needed adjustment. The reality was that I had lost my son, at least for now. The man who showed up to exchange visits was a stranger, someone who performed the minimum required by the court order but showed no warmth. He spoke to me only when necessary, his responses clipped and formal. But every time I felt myself wavering, every time I wondered if it had been worth it, I would see Lily. And I would know that yes, it had been worth it. Even if Marcus never forgave me, it had been worth it to show Lily that someone in her life thought she deserved better. At the 6-month review, the judge was presented with reports from Helen, from the family counselor, and from both sides. Helen's report was positive, noting that the visits had been beneficial for Lily and that my behavior had been appropriate and child-focused. The family counselor's report was more mixed, noting that while the parents were attending sessions, there was significant resistance to feedback. Judge Morrison decided to extend the visitation arrangement, but adjusted it to allow for unsupervised visits of 4 hours once per month, in addition to the supervised 2-hour visits twice per month. It was progress. A year passed, then another. The visits became routine. Lily continued to grow, her hair eventually reaching her shoulders again. She was more confident at 8 years old, more willing to tell me when something was bothering her. Marcus and I never fully repaired our relationship. We were civil at the exchanges, occasionally exchanged brief texts about Lily, but the warmth we had once shared was gone. It was a loss I mourned, but I had made my peace with it. On Lily's 9th birthday, she asked if she could spend the whole day with me. It required coordination and court approval, but eventually it was arranged. We spent the day doing all her favorite things. At the end of the day, as I was tucking her in at my house, she looked up at me. "Grandma Eleanor?" "Yes, sweetheart? Thank you for not forgetting about me." I stroked her hair. I could never forget about you. Never in a million years. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat in my living room and thought about the journey that had brought us here. I thought about the woman I had been 2.5 years ago, the one who prioritized peace over confrontation, who stayed silent about things that troubled her. That woman would have done nothing the day she saw Lily with her head shaved. She would have swallowed her outrage and gone home to cry alone. But I was not that woman anymore. I had learned that sometimes love requires courage, that protecting children means being willing to lose relationships with adults, that standing up for what is right is more important than being comfortable. The cost had been high. My relationship with Marcus might never fully recover. But when I looked at Lily sleeping peacefully, I knew it had been worth it. She knew now that someone had fought for her, that someone had seen her suffering and refused to look away. That knowledge would stay with her, shaping her understanding of love and family and standing up for herself. The journey was not over. There would be more court reviews, more years of carefully rebuilding trust. But there would also be more birthdays celebrated, more cookies baked, more moments of connection. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt peace. Not the false peace of avoiding conflict, but real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you acted with integrity even when it was painful. I had been tested and found myself capable of more courage than I knew I possessed. I had learned that silence in the face of harm is itself a form of harm. And I had learned that the love between a grandmother and granddaughter can survive separation and legal battles. It can survive because that kind of love is rooted in something deeper than convenience. It is rooted in commitment, in showing up, in refusing to abandon someone just because it becomes difficult. Lily would grow up knowing that her grandma Eleanor had fought for her. She would understand that real love sometimes looks like conflict, like boundaries, like standing up even when everyone else tells you to sit down. And that, I thought, was the greatest gift I could give her. Not just my presence, but the unshakable knowledge that she was worth fighting for. Sometimes the hero's journey does not end with triumph and reconciliation. Sometimes it ends with hard-won wisdom, with relationships forever changed, with the quiet satisfaction of knowing you did right by someone who could not protect themselves. And sometimes that has to be enough.